It was a cold, rainy morning in downtown Chicago when Samuel, a soft-spoken black janitor in his late 50s, reported for his shift at the towering glass and steel office building that seemed to scrape the belly of the sky. The clouds above were heavy with gloom, and the streets below bustled with umbrellas and hurried footsteps, as though the entire city was trying to escape the chill that seeped through every crack and crevice. Samuel had worked in this building for over 20 years, his hands hardened by scrubbing floors, polishing brass, and sweeping away the dirt of people too busy or too proud to notice him. Each morning he arrived before sunrise, pushing his well-worn cleaning cart through the lobby, wiping away the traces of the previous day's hustle, making everything shine so that others could walk through their world of glass walls and leather chairs without ever thinking about the man who made it so. Samuel was invisible to them, a shadow that moved with quiet purpose, a figure in gray overalls who existed on the edge of their vision. But Samuel didn't mind. He had long ago accepted his place in this world. His mother had taught him when he was young that dignity wasn't in what you did, but how you did it, and Samuel lived by that. He believed that kindness mattered, even when no one saw it, especially when no one saw it. That morning, as the rain drummed steadily against the tall glass panes of the building, Samuel pushed his cart across the polished marble floor, the soft squeak of his shoes the only sound in the vast, empty lobby. He paused for a moment, glancing out at the gray world beyond the doors. And that's when he saw her, a small, elderly woman, seated alone on one of the benches near the entrance. She was hunched beneath a thin, worn scarf that barely protected her silver hair from the damp chill, and her frail hands clutched a white cane that rested beside her on the bench. Her eyes, clouded and sightless, stared at nothing, and Samuel felt a sudden pang of sorrow. She looked so small, so vulnerable, sitting there in the drafty lobby as the cold crept in with every gust of wind that slipped through the door. Samuel hesitated only a moment before he approached her, his voice gentle, careful not to startle her. "Ma'am, are you all right? Is there something I can do for you?" he asked. The woman turned her face toward his voice, her lips trembling slightly as though she wanted to speak but wasn't sure how. "I'm just waiting," she said after a pause, her voice soft, almost lost beneath the sound of the rain. "I was trying to get to the park. I thought maybe I could sit in the sun for a while, feel the breeze, listen to the birds, but I must have lost my way, and now the rain, ... Her words trailed off, and Samuel's heart ached at the sadness in her voice. He knew that kind of loneliness, the kind that wrapped around you on cold, wet days when it felt like the world had forgotten you existed. Without a second thought, Samuel gently took her arm and helped her to a quieter corner of the lobby. Away from the draft, he settled her into a cushioned chair, careful to make sure she was comfortable. Then, without fanfare or hesitation, he reached into his cart and pulled out the brown paper bag that held his lunch: a sandwich, an apple, and a small bottle of water. It wasn't much, but it was all he had, and in that moment, it felt like the most natural thing in the world to offer it to her. "Please," he said, placing the bag in her hands. "Have this. You need it more than I do." The woman hesitated, her fingers trembling as she touched the bag. "But this is your lunch," she said softly. Samuel shook his head, though she couldn't see him. "Don't worry about me, ma'am. I'll be fine. You go ahead." Tears welled in the woman's eyes, and for a long moment she said nothing, simply holding the bag as though it were something precious. Finally, hunger and gratitude overcame pride, and she opened the bag, taking out the sandwich and eating slowly, savoring each bite. Samuel sat nearby, saying nothing, simply keeping her company as she ate, his presence a quiet reassurance. What Samuel didn't know was that from the top of the marble staircase that curved elegantly down into the lobby, a woman was watching. She was tall and graceful, dressed in a tailored coat that spoke of wealth and power. Her dark hair swept up in a style that matched the sharp lines of her suit. Her name was Victoria Reynolds, and she was one of the city's most successful businesswomen, owner of several companies and, as it happened, the very building where Samuel worked. Victoria had come to the building that morning for a meeting, but as she descended the stairs, she had seen the elderly woman sitting alone. And then she had seen Samuel approach, had watched his every gentle movement, had heard his kind words. And what Samuel couldn't possibly have known was that the elderly woman was Victoria's mother. Margaret Reynolds had always been fiercely independent, even in her later years. Despite Victoria's wealth, Margaret had chosen to live simply, in a modest apartment not far from the city center. She didn't want to be a burden, didn't want to live in the grand mansion Victoria offered, didn't want to be cared for by staff. She wanted to live life on her own terms. Victoria respected that, but she worried, and so she kept an eye on her mother from a distance, making sure she was safe without infringing on her freedom. That morning, seeing her mother lost and vulnerable, seeing Samuel's quiet, selfless kindness, something deep inside Victoria shifted. She had spent so many years in boardrooms and at galas, surrounded by people who smiled at her face and schemed behind her back. People who measured worth in dollars and deals. But here was a man who had nothing to gain, who didn't even know who her mother was, and he had given freely, out of nothing but the goodness of his heart. As Margaret finished the sandwich and sipped the water, Samuel continued to sit nearby, speaking softly about the weather, about the park she had wanted to visit, about how beautiful it would be when the sun came out again. He didn't talk about himself, he didn't boast about what he'd done. He didn't even seem to think he'd done anything remarkable. He was just a man who had seen someone in need and done what he could to help. When Margaret was ready to leave, Samuel offered to walk with her to help her get home, but she smiled and shook her head. "You've done more than enough, young man," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "God bless you for your kindness. You've reminded me today that there is still goodness in this world." Samuel nodded, feeling a warmth in his chest that no amount of cold rain could dampen. "Take care, ma'am," he said, watching as she made her way slowly out of the lobby, her cane tapping gently against the floor. He didn't see Victoria standing at the foot of the stairs, her eyes shining with unshed tears, her heart full of gratitude for this man who had shown her mother such compassion. He didn't see her watching as he went back to his cart, wiping his hands on his rag, ready to return to his work as though nothing extraordinary had happened. But for Victoria, something extraordinary had happened. She had witnessed a rare moment of pure humanity, a reminder that in a world obsessed with status and wealth, the greatest treasures were often found in the hearts of those who had the least. And in that moment, she made a silent promise to herself that this man's kindness would not go unrewarded. Dear viewers, if this story has touched your heart, if it has reminded you of the power of simple kindness, please take a moment to subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us continue to share these stories that inspire and uplift. Stories that remind us all of the goodness that still exists in the world. Together, we can spread light in even the darkest corners. Don't forget to like, comment, and share this video so that others can be inspired too. Stay tuned for Chapter 2, where Samuel's life takes an unexpected turn that will change everything forever. The next morning dawned brighter, the storm clouds having finally released their last drops of rain in the quiet hours of the night, leaving behind streets washed clean and skies painted in soft shades of gold and pink. As the sun rose over the city, Samuel rose from his small, modest bed in his one-bedroom apartment on the outskirts of town, the gentle light streaming through the thin curtains reminding him of the gift of another day. He washed, dressed in his familiar gray overalls, packed another simple lunch, a peanut butter sandwich, a banana, and a bottle of water, and made his way to the bus stop. His heart content in the knowledge that he had done something good. Day before, he thought of the elderly woman he had helped, hoping she had found her way safely home, hoping the sandwich had given her some strength, hoping the world had been a little kinder to her after she left his care. The bus rumbled through the waking city, carrying Samuel to the towering building where he worked, a building that glistened in the morning sun as if it too had been washed clean by the night's rain. Samuel stepped off the bus, nodded politely to the security guard at the entrance, and pushed his cleaning cart into the familiar embrace of the lobby, ready to begin another day of honest work. But even as he moved through his tasks, wiping down the marble floors, polishing the brass railings, emptying the bins, and making everything shine, he couldn't have known that today would not be like any other day. For unseen eyes had watched his kindness, and unseen hearts had been moved. Victoria Reynolds arrived at the building not long after, stepping out of her sleek black car with a purpose in her stride that only those who truly knew her would have recognized as born, not of business ambition, but of something deeper, something gentler, something stirred by the quiet act of compassion she had witnessed the day before. She had not slept much that night, her mind turning over the image of the janitor who had shared his lunch with her mother, who had asked for nothing, expected nothing, who had given what little he had simply because it was the right thing to do. And so she had made up her mind that morning to find him, to speak to him, to offer not charity but gratitude, and perhaps, if he would allow it, a chance at something better. She entered the lobby and saw him at once, bent over his work, focused, and diligent as always. For a moment she simply watched him, marveling at how a man who had given so much of himself could go so unnoticed by the world around him. Then she approached, her heels clicking softly against the polished floor. "Excuse me," she said, her voice gentle. Samuel straightened, turning to face her, recognizing her as the elegant woman he had seen the day before, but still unaware of who she truly was. "Yes, ma'am, how can I help you?" he asked politely. Victoria smiled, warmth and sincerity in her eyes. "Actually, I wanted to thank you. Yesterday, I saw what you did for that elderly lady. That was my mother." For a moment, Samuel was too stunned to speak. His eyes widened in surprise, and then his cheeks flushed with embarrassment. "Oh, I didn't know. I'm so sorry, ma'am. I didn't mean." Victoria shook her head quickly, cutting off his apology. "No, please don't apologize. You did a beautiful thing. You showed my mother a kindness that many wouldn't have, and I want you to know how much that means to me." Samuel looked down, uncomfortable with praise, his hands gripping the rag he held. "It wasn't anything, ma'am." She looked like she needed help. Anyone would have done the same. But Victoria knew better. She had lived long enough, seen enough of the world, to know that not everyone would have done the same. She saw, in Samuel, a goodness that was rare, a generosity of spirit that could not be bought or taught. "I'd like to do something for you," she said gently, "not out of pity, but because I believe people like you deserve to be seen, to be recognized." Samuel shook his head again, humility etched into every line of his face. "I appreciate that, ma'am, truly, but I'm fine. I have a job, a roof over my head. That's more than a lot of folks have." But Victoria was not one to give up so easily, especially when it came to repaying a debt of the heart. Over the days that followed, she quietly made inquiries, learning more about Samuel, about the life he led with such dignity, despite its hardships. She discovered how he spent his weekends volunteering at the local shelter, how he helped his neighbors without ever asking for anything in return, how he lived simply and gave generously of what little he had. And with each thing she learned, her respect for him grew. She arranged for Samuel to be promoted within the building, offering him the position of supervisor of custodial services, a role that came with a significant raise, better hours, and greater responsibility. At first Samuel resisted, uncomfortable with the attention, but Victoria insisted, assuring him that it was not charity, but a recognition of the work he had always done and the character he had always shown. Slowly, Samuel came to accept the changes, though he remained the same humble, hard-working man he had always been. His new position allowed him to move into a better apartment, one where he could finally have a small garden on the balcony, a lifelong dream of his. He continued to volunteer, continued to help where he could, his heart unchanged by his improved circumstances. And in the quiet moments between their busy lives, a friendship blossomed between Samuel and Victoria, built not on wealth or status, but on mutual respect and shared values. They would sit and talk during breaks, sharing stories of their lives, their hopes, their dreams. Victoria introduced Samuel to her mother formally, and Margaret welcomed him as if he were an old friend, grateful beyond words for the kindness he had shown when no one else had. Samuel became, in many ways, like family to them, a reminder of what truly mattered in a world so often blinded by material things. In time, Victoria invited Samuel to dinners, to family gatherings, always making sure he knew that he was valued not for what he had done, but for who he was. And Samuel, for his part, remained ever grateful for the unexpected blessings that had come from a simple act of kindness on a rainy morning. He often thought back to that day, to the choice he had made to share his lunch, and marveled at how that one small gesture had rippled outward, changing not just his life, but the lives of those around him. And so, dear viewers, if this story has touched your heart, if it has reminded you of the power of kindness, the way one small act can change the world in ways we cannot even imagine, please take a moment to subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us continue to share these true and inspiring stories that uplift the spirit and remind us all of the goodness that still exists in the world. Don't forget to like, comment, and share this video so that others can be inspired, too. Together, let's spread more light, more hope, and more kindness. Stay tuned for more amazing tales of humanity at its best.